I want to take a little bit of time this morning to discuss a little bit of the things that we've been talking about in class through the readings, mostly through the readings since we've only been able to have one face-to-face class. So I wanted to make sure that everyone's on the same page, and I was able to sort of go through some of the material with you, because I know some of it can be fairly dense, especially for those of you that might not be too familiar with rhetoric or ancient rhetoric or really anything that we've been talking about. But I hope that the book has been useful to you. I really like the Ancient Rhetorics book, but I really hope that you're getting a lot out of the other book as well. Use that mostly as a resource. Go through it with a fine-tooth comb. Actually, after the end of this class, I hope you never read anything without reading it with a fine-tooth comb. But mostly focus on the ways that the ancient rhetors attempted to allow us to read and to teach us how to read. And I'm going to go a little bit through that more as we progress. I hope you guys are understanding what Kairos means. Essentially, when you took your English 111, you've probably heard the terms ethos, pathos, logos as far as the rhetorical triangle, and I'll go over those at the end of this lecture a little bit more. But I always add the fourth when discussing. And the ancient rhetors, many of them would probably cringe a little bit at only teaching ethos, pathos, and logos, because as you read in the chapter, Kairos is infinitely important. Without timing, you lose everything in a rhetorical situation. Time, like you read in the book, timeliness is one of the most important aspects. This, of course, is Kairos. You've read it in your text. If you look at the relief that you're looking at right now, you'll notice that everything that he is about is balance. He's all about negotiating various different aspects all at once. He's got the blade that he's holding in his hand while trying to negotiate the scale. So on one hand, he's balancing the blade as well as the scale itself. So he's dealing with two different forms of balance. The timeliness, as you read, of his hair being forward, the wind going back, as you could see by the wing on his back, that's alluding to the passage of time, and how you really have to hit a kairotic moment at the right time, because that moment is fleeting. And he's balancing on a beam at the same time. So his representation of rhetoric is essentially that in any given rhetorical situation, you really are not negotiating just one thing, but you're negotiating many principles and many different arguments. And it's really important to understand when you're looking at a rhetorical situation, not to just look at the time or the issues at place, but the very first consideration that you should be making is that of your audience. Like, who is your audience? And to also understand that your audience is never this one big homogenous mass who all believe the absolute same thing, unless they've been completely indoctrinated and they all only believe one particular thing. I doubt that's really possible to have a completely indoctrinated society, but it's been attempted. I know many are trying to do it again, and but you have to understand that your audience comes from various different backgrounds, and they're going to bring to the situation that you're engaging them in, whether they're reading you or they're listening to something that you're saying. They bring certain things with them. They bring baggage, they bring knowledge, they bring understanding, and they bring misconceptions in many ways, as well as you as the rhetor brings. You bring your own misconceptions, you bring your own attitudes, you bring your own upbringings, and things like that. So it really does behoove you to understand where your audience is coming from in general, and then your goal as a rhetor is to sort of try to bring them all into one unified understanding of what you're trying to say. They'll take it as they will. You can't ever assume that you're going to convince an entire crew. You're never going to assume that you're going to always win the rhetorical situation. But that's not to say that the goal is necessarily to win. The role of excuse me, the role of invention that we're reading in the book that the ancient rhetors believe so firmly in is to basically just not convince, but to understand, and to allow yourself, as I mentioned in class the other day, allow yourself to be convinced. But this image that you're looking at right here, that's Kairos as the ancients made it. That's how they represented it. I'd like to, when I think about it, I think about it kind of different. I like to bring it more into a sort of modern sense. This is actually how I view Kairos, or any sort of rhetorical situation. I'm sure you guys are all pretty aware of the game of Tetris. Some have probably played it often while wasting time. I had a colleague that would play it while listening to lectures. Some of you are probably going to turn this lecture off and go play it right now. But anyways, the role of the game, as you know, is to try to fill in the gaps. And as the block is moving, you're quickly trying to negotiate the field below and find the best place to put the block. The first thing that you do with Tetris is to look at the ground below and to understand, okay, what does it look like? What would fit in there? As far as rhetoric is concerned, and using this metaphor, I'd like you to think for a moment. I'd like you to think about each block, each individual block, being a different part of an argument. So let's say that light, I don't know, I'm colorblind, that teal colored one in the middle at the bottom. Say that's the first thing that was said about a particular issue. For example, somebody might have, that might have been the first time somebody ever said anything about global warming. Might have said, okay, here is a situation that I see. And then somebody might have kind of agreed with it, but had a different view. And so they came in with a different shaped box, and they placed it right next to it. And then slowly and surely, the different arguments get built, and they build upon one another. And the goal is not necessarily just to keep adding stuff to the top, but to really use invention techniques and to read the entire situation, understand the entire field underneath you. What you're looking for in rhetoric, in using this metaphor, what you're looking is not to necessarily add pieces, but to find gaps. I'm going to give you a moment to think about, look at this situation in front of you, look at the field, the different blocks, and think about what might be the most important, or one of the most important pieces of that particular rhetorical field. You'll notice right at the bottom, at the very bottom, you'll notice that there's a gap. There's one black hole, one black square place where there was not a block placed. Now, your goal in doing invention, or one of the goals in doing inventions of rhetoric and understanding the rhetorical field around you, is to find that gap. Because say you're looking at this argument, this grand argument that's going on around you, and you're doing your research, and you find a place where way back in the field, you'll notice, whoa, there's something that's been overlooked. There's something very paramount that has been overlooked that could really change the way that we view this field, that we view this understanding. Right there at the very bottom, you're looking at the foundation. That's the very foundation of the argument of the field. If you can, as students and as readers, scholars, readers, whichever you want to call yourself or however you're acting at a particular time, your goal is to find that one little piece that people have overlooked. And as soon as you do that, that's when you start really creating knowledge. That's when you really start adding to the conversation. A lot of, look at this L-shaped or sideways L-shaped block. He's going to come in, or he or she, sorry, don't mean to insult. He or she's going to come in and add another piece to the puzzle. But all this one's going to do is add one more layer on top of other things. He or she's going to add something only to the tertiary. So yes, it's important. Yes, it's valuable. But the key is not to just keep adding, but it's to really enrich the conversation and find those places that things that needed to be said were not said. And I really do think that's the most important aspect of it. And when we're talking about amplification and Kairos, that black piece right there, that black space, is a kairotic moment that was completely missed. And that adds to that's because of the nature of the kairotic moment. A lot of times things are going so fast, there's so much noise going on around a conversation that a lot of times people don't take the time to really look at the situation and to look at the individual pieces and to really analyze them for their value and their employment of the kairotic moment. And so your goal through doing amplifications and krya, like we're reading in the text, is not just to do this waste of time exercise and things like that, but it's to learn how to really analyze the pieces of the puzzle, the different things that are read. Somebody might say something over and over again. Like they might be just making these arguments. It'll almost sound like they're yelling an argument. But they mean nothing until we really start to learn how to unpack that argument. Okay, what do they mean by that? Why did they use this particular word choice? Let's see. So what I really want you to do, and what the ancient redders would argue, is to slow down, which is something that we don't really do a lot of in our society, and especially in our scholarship, where we are given massive amounts, almost impossible amounts of things to read. And a lot of times, because we give so much to read, we often tend to skim them. Or even if we are reading them, we're not reading them slow and carefully enough. So what I'm really hoping that this lesson does for you is for you to really slow down your reading, really, and slow down your reception of an argument, of anything that you learn, and really analyze it. Break it down into its composite pieces, dissect it, and then tear it apart and amplify it.